Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Career Catalyst session. I'm Annabelle Baldi from BioBuzz, and I'm very excited to have you guys all here for another one of our Career Catalyst sessions that we do every Tuesday. So these are conversations that are focused on real-world career paths in life science. And as some of you already know from kind of the past sessions that we've done in earlier January, Career Catalyst has kind of been evolving this year to spotlight professionals from across our community and showcase how they're navigating those career pivots. So we're going to have track leads kind of coming in and helping to host, coming into my role. Today, we are kind of taking a break for that and doing a special session. And I'll be, again, in the hosting role, talking with Charlie here shortly. So like I said, today's session, it's going to be on Beyond the Bench, building a career in scientific sales leadership. And we're going to be exploring how professionals can kind of move from the lab into more of the commercial and customer-facing roles. So this session is really to kind of help guide you into reframing your scientific experience as a competitive advantage. And like I said, today we're joined by Charlie Kivolowitz, Associate Director of North American Sales at BlueWhale Bio. And Charlie has spent over a decade as a lab scientist before transitioning into life science sales. So he has deep experience in flow cytometry, assay development, and cell therapy. And like I said, he's in roles that bridge kind of that science, that strategy, and that customer impact. So before we dive in, before he gets into his presentation portion, I do want to give a thank you to the sponsors for today's session. So we have Workforce Genetics, we have BioTrack. Workforce Genetics has spent over 20 years making life science companies, helping them to build high-performing teams. And definitely check them out at workforcegenetics.com. It's our sister company. Also want to give a shout out to BioTrack, who has hands-on training workshops. They've supported over 17,000 scientists across the industry. So if you're looking for any upskilling opportunities, I would definitely check them out at biotrack.com. And again, another reminder that this session is part of the BioBuzz Talent Lab. So you can join the beta testing of that. It's your hub for career growth, job opportunities, and industry connections. If you haven't joined already, like I said, definitely get on, join that. That's how you'll be able to access more opportunities like this. All right, and with that, let's get started. I'm going to hand it over to Charlie.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me in. I do appreciate the time to come in and talk about this stuff. I know from my own career journey, there was no small amount of stress moving from the lab into commercial roles. So I'm very excited and grateful to be able to kind of talk about some of the things that I've learned and hopefully share with other scientists who may be in the process of leaving the lab or just exploring what life looks like outside of the lab. Okay, so the way I was kind of thinking to present this today is along the lines of the story kind of my career and some of the really important things that helped me along the way. Out of undergrad, I got to work right away in a lab that was, attached to the university I had studied in. I was doing kind of biochemistry, biophysics, a lot of microscopy, that sort of thing. And I realized that wasn't the right field for me. So then I went to the Broad Institute after that. Same thing, doing kind of genomics and kind of high throughput industrial science. Similar learning. It was not for me. And this story kind of continued over and over, right? I went through several different organizations before really getting exposed to immunology and kind of falling in love with immunology at Weill Cornell. And from there, going to grad school at Jefferson in Philadelphia. And then realizing that despite having spent at that point over a decade working ultimately towards a PhD, the PhD actually is not something that I wanted to continue. So about 4 years in, I took a terminal master's and actually went to work at the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia to do their clinical assay design in the clinical immunology lab. That was my kind of final lab role, I would say. And it's really the one that kind of helped me transition from the academic world into kind of the commercial world. And so a lot of the things that I picked up along the way, some of the kind of tricks and tips that I would give others would be stay in touch with your suppliers, right? If you are like I was working as a lab manager, you're probably managing between 10 and 30 active relationships with suppliers, depending on, how your organization is organized, right? You have coordinations with other labs. You have people within your lab that you're probably working with on a pretty regular basis. Those kinds of people skills and those relationships really build out your network and also give you all sorts of openings if you're willing to kind of take advantage of them. And the basis of this, and I would say one of the best bits of advice I got very, very early on in my scientific career was to lead with curiosity. And what that means practically, it's also great in like thesis defenses and things like that. Get scientists to talk about their science, and they will go on for a very, very long period of time. Which is awesome if you like hearing about science, and also awesome if you don't have a good answer to whatever question you were just asked. So by staying genuinely interested, in the people around you, working with them in kind of their own terms, I would say, ask them questions, care about what they're doing, ask them why they like what they are doing and what they're interested about, what keeps them coming to work every day. Questions like that will really build kind of a deep relationship. And the other thing too is people kind of psychologically enjoy those conversations, and that enjoyment will carry over into how they think about you going forward as you start to build your network and then look to move out of the lab. And that's really what kind of grounds my own relationship building, leading into my third little bullet here. That builds, the positive rapport. But the other two really important things are, one, to build trust, which means, if you say you're going to do something, you do it, you show up, you show that consistency, you become someone that people can rely on. That goes a really long way. And the reputation, right? Do good work, like identify what is kind of perfect, and then maybe drop 10% to get to excellent. And if you can hold that, you're in really good shape, because I have seen others try to hit perfect all the time, and very often they burn out. But do excellent work, be consistent with it, be an easy and communicative person to work with, right? And sometimes that even means going out of your way to help other people in the lab. One question I love in building these relationships too is like, is there anything I can do to help you? What's going on for you right now? How can I help? I've got an extra hour free tomorrow. Is there something I could do to make your life easier? Questions like that, people will really appreciate. And then you go out and you build that network on LinkedIn, and also through professional societies. But I will say, moving into the commercial world, one of the biggest things I see for people coming from academia is a lack of a LinkedIn presence, because, the old school, you didn't really need it. These days, if you want to get out there and get noticed, that is kind of how you have to go. Next slide, please, Annabelle. Now, that's how to get into a career path. But a deeper question that hopefully you'll be asking yourself along this, and I know I did too, right? My exit from graduate school was not at all along the lines that I had planned for myself or really the rest of my life. So what it comes back to is now identifying not necessarily the career path that you're going to go for today, but identifying the things that you already know and have learned from your current and prior experience will lead you in the right direction, right? So I never would have just looked at a sales career and said, that's the thing I'm going to go do now that I'm done with the lab. It kind of fell into my lap, honestly. But I knew when the recruiters first started coming to talk to me that for me, I was missing the ability to kind of express my own personality and my own social nature. I like working with people. I like moving from topic to topic very quickly. I like covering a lot of different science and seeing the world and traveling around. And I also knew, for example, that like I had kind of home goals, things that I wanted in terms of lifestyle and the ability to provide that weren't being met in the lab. So I looked then for roles that fit some of those boxes. And originally when I made this slide, I thought of it as like a big Venn diagram. And then I realized suddenly it gets very hard to see what's what when you have 37 different circles all overlapping with each other. But the other really big fit to be aware of here too, especially if you're coming out of the lab, is the mission and the science. So does it match with your personal interests, right? If you're super into, genomics, I would not suggest looking for a career in like scientific labware. That's probably not going to be the place to go. And if you find that the mission, the goal of doing science, whatever that is to you, is really important, looking for organizations that are kind of aligned with that helps, right? And then from there, you can go and look for job postings. You find people on LinkedIn, you reach out and you ask them, how did you get in this role? Can I talk to you about it? I'm really curious. I'm looking to leave the lab. I guarantee you, if you ask nicely, most people will probably say yes, because helping others psychologically, it feels good. We get a good story about ourselves. We like to meet new people. Like at some level, we like to meet new people. And so what I would suggest is at the bottom here, my modification of the advice I got going into grad school that I promptly disregarded, which is for grad school, pick the people, not the project. And when thinking of your career, identify the roles that fit your goals, not necessarily the goals that fit the role you're currently in. That was my pithy little phrase there. So next slide, please. So how do we actually translate that into a commercial role? This is where it gets difficult kind of intellectually. This can be very hard. You've got to be able to step back and kind of categorize and strip down the underlying, I'd really call it like the philosophy of what you're doing. And this is kind of a realization I had while going through grad school. As I was learning immunology, I was also seeing these kind of analogies to lots of other things that I'd already encountered. So, for example, one that really stuck out to me is that I've been training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a long time. And when I talk to, kind of the black belts in Jiu-Jitsu, the way that they interact with and talk about this very physical martial art starts sounding oddly like the way that a lot of the PhD level scientists I was talking to about immunology were talking about their art. The thing here is all the specifics are different, right? We're not going to talk about cells. We're not going to talk about techniques. But what you do have are relationships between things. You have categories of activities, right? All of these become skills. And then if you can look at your resume and break down each of those skills, kind of strip away the specifics, and then put that together in a general concept, right? I didn't just do a flow cytometry run. I organized our buying relationships. I did a cost benefit analysis for a different or multiple series of reagents. I planned out and optimized a multi-week, multi-step project to accomplish XYZ goal. Those are all general skills that you can take from the lab into any environment that you go on into. And that's really how I would suggest reframing what you do at the technical level into the kind of transferable skills that an interviewer or a company would be looking for. And when you are actually out there in the field and you're interviewing for roles that you're interested in, you've got to be able to kind of take that experience and talk about the specifics to show that you have the technical mastery, but then reapply it, just like I was kind of saying. So for example, my first startup that I worked at as a salesperson specialized in a very flow cytometry oriented reagent. And so just like I was saying, I took my ability to, as a lab manager, as a grad student, organize my vendor relationships, identify reagents, do cost benefit analyses, all those kinds of things. And I talked about them at the technical level. And then I said something along the lines of like, as a salesperson, what I bring from these experiences is the ability to kind of systematize the tasks that are in front of me, to set clear and specific goals, to be mindful of, technical fit, cost, timing, etc., and then to put together an actionable plan to advance on those goals. And if you're able to kind of talk about it at both of those levels, it becomes a very powerful piece of any interview. And so to really sum that up, you've got to take your skills, you break them down into component parts and identify kind of the stripped down non-technical aspect, and then analogize that into the new role. And that I think is my little 15-minute spiel on my thought process in moving out of the lab and into industry. So I'd love your questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Charlie. That was great. Yeah, let me pull up this next slide too for anyone, just to kind of have this up as we're kind of entering the Q&A session. Or Charlie's LinkedIn.
One thing I forgot to note, just because I should every time. So everything I just said was personal opinion. It is not in any way representative of any organization that I'm associated with.
There we go. Nice little disclaimer there at the end.
Mm-hmm. All the way at the end when everybody stopped paying attention. Yep.
Right, great. So like I said, now entering kind of the Q&A portion of today's session, and sure you guys have a lot of questions. So you can, as I said at the start of the program, you can use the raise hand function to, get in the queue, and I'll kind of help moderate that, or you can put your question into the chat today, and I will push those over to Charlie. I do want to open the floor. I have some questions for you, Charlie. So first one is, what do you think was the most important part of your scientific background that ended up being the most useful once you moved into sales or that more commercial role?
That's a good question. I would say it's actually the curiosity and the passion for science that carried me through, because it was a very tough emotional transition from the lab into a sales career. I was letting go of kind of my conception of myself long term. There was a lot of identity. What really helped was that interest in science, and it carried me through in the sense that by interacting with my customers, I'd actually get to learn about all of their science. I've had entire hour-long meetings where officially I'm supposed to be selling our product, and we talk about the product for 5 minutes at the end, because we're just having fun talking about whatever that person is working on and like how it can be applied. And some of those relationships have really become both the most commercially successful for me, but also kind of the most personally fulfilling. And I will say too, specific to scientific sales careers, what I do is a very technical kind of sale. So it is very much involved in the details of what the customer is doing. For me, that's a lot of fun, because I get to come back and talk to them, every month, every 3 months, whatever, and they'll have gone and done a bunch of experiments, and they just bring me the data, and I don't have to actually go into the lab and pipette anything to go, troubleshoot all that stuff. So it's just data high after data high after data high. That's really kind of, I realize now, what I enjoyed about doing experiments in the first place. I just get to do it with lots of different people in more of a supporting role now.